I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. And I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens, you turn bones into armies, you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. Oh, you're the only one who can. And there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. There's nothing.
I want to talk to us about one of these one words again this week. So far we've looked at the word no, and we've looked at behold, and today I want to talk to you about the word yes. Now, if you struggled a bit with the idea of no a couple of weeks back, or if you were a bit confused about the word behold last week, then maybe, like a lot of other Christians in the world today, you feel a lot more comfortable with this word yes. We like to say yes, don't we? It feels nice to be able to say yes. You get a certain feeling from knowing that other people can rely on you because why? You're a yes person. And maybe even just now, hearing that this talk today is on the word yes, all of a sudden now you're preparing yourselves for an uplifting and an inspiring message. And a lot of the time, a yes is just that. A yes is a positive thing. A yes is a nice, uplifting, inspiring, kind of lift you up and make you feel good about your day kind of thing. It's nice to say yes. But have you ever said yes to someone or to something? Maybe it was to a job, or living in a particular place, or driving that particular car, or marrying that particular person, having that much money in your account, or wearing those kinds of clothes. And so after saying yes to that decision, you live and you work and you strive for it and you wait and you reach and you obsess. And then finally, when you do get whatever that thing is that you've said yes to all that time, it kind of feels like meh. And saying yes to that thing feels actually a lot like saying no. Or saying yes to that particular thing means that you have had to say no to many, many other things, where the sparkle and the shininess starts to wear off a little bit. Anybody know what that feels like? Yeah. Where you've worked and you've waited and you've been patient and you've strived and you've earned and you've achieved just to get to that goal, just to get to that yes, only to find that it's empty, that it's hollow, that actually it feels a lot like a no. When saying yes feels a lot like saying no. Brian McLaren, in his book Naked Spirituality, says that saying yes is an invitation to grow. It's an invitation for maturity. He talks about how we need to change the direction of our yes in our lives, in our spiritual lives more particularly. That it needs to move from yes as an event to yes as a practice. It doesn't sound like much, but there is a big difference between those two, moving from yes as an event into yes as a practice. See, yes as an event is kind of expecting God to say yes to me. So I've said yes to God, and now God will say yes to me. Sounds very conditional, very transactional. If I say X, Y, Z, God will do A, B, C. If I put in 1 and 2, God will give me 3. It's very transactional, which is okay until it's not. It's fine to start at that point, but you can't just stay there. That's a starting point. See, that's a really immature way of looking at our relationship with God. Like how we saw last week, that this relationship isn't static. It's a movement. It has to go somewhere. But the yes that God is really calling us into, that's a yes that is an invitation to say yes with God, to say yes alongside God. God's yes is always the invitation to life with God. So I want us to read a weird story from the Hebrew Bible that I think is going to help us get hold of this idea a bit better, of this idea of saying yes to God as a way of saying yes with God. So it's taken from 2 Kings chapter 5. Quite a well-known story for some people. 2 Kings chapter 5. I'll just read the first little bit of it. The story's quite long. 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Naaman was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," said the king of Aram. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: "Why have you torn your robes? Make the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. So we've got our main character straight away in this story, Naaman. He's not even actually an Israelite, we read here. He's not part of God's chosen family. He's actually a famous general for an army that's been fighting against Israel. He's an enemy. And we're told early on in this story that God has actually helped Aram beat Israel in battle, which is another story for another time. So all we need to know really about Naaman is he's famous, he's successful, he's influential, he's important, he's wealthy, he's valuable. But, and that's where the story hinges on that but there, but he has leprosy. Now, when you hear the word leprosy, we instantly go to kind of gross sores and bits falling off and hooded figures ringing bells and calling out, "Unclean, unclean." But the word leprosy here is a word that was used for all sorts of different kind of skin diseases and disorders. So we know that Naaman has some sort of issue with his skin. But all we do know, really, is that it's bad. It's so bad that this army general is willing to go all the way into enemy territory to try and be healed. See, Israel and Aram aren't friends. So there's a risk involved here with even him travelling into that area. But apparently it's worth the risk. As we looked back at a couple of weeks back, as Naaman goes into this enemy territory, he is faced with and he meets loads and loads of no's. He hits over and over again in this story that word no. No, 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 no. First, he goes to the king of Israel. It makes sense. That's who you want to go to if you're going to make an impression. That's who he's used to dealing with when he has an issue or when he has something that needs to be dealt with in Aram. He goes to the king of Aram. So when he's in Israel, he goes to the king in Israel. And he's got his letter written by the king of Aram, and he's got all of his money and his entourage, all to show that Naaman is a big deal. He's a top dog in Aram. The king of Israel, when he receives Naaman and this request, absolutely freaks out, doesn't he? See, he's already, as a king and as that nation, Israel, they have already been defeated by Aram. And now here comes the general of that nation, of that army that's already defeated them. Here he comes, this general, with an impossible task. The king even says to him, "Am I God that I can cure this, that I can heal people, that I can take someone who's dead and bring them back to life?" And so the king of Israel just assumes that this must be some kind of trap. The king of Aram must be setting him up in some way. And then he can't heal Naaman. And then Aram can come in again and cause all sorts of problems for Israel and for the king. So that straight away feels like a no in Naaman's story, doesn't it? He comes all this way with this letter from the king and all this stuff, and the king of Israel says no. But then we're told that there's a prophet, the man of God, Elisha. He hears all about this, and he sends a message saying that he can heal Naaman. He can heal this enemy of Israel. He can heal this foreign general. And then instead of meeting him face to face, if you continue to read the story, you'll see, instead of meeting Naaman, this general, face to face, Elisha just sends out a message with one of his servants. And that really gets Naaman's back up. Doesn't this prophet know who I am? I'm Naaman. I'm the famous general of the Syrian army. I'm a big deal. Look at all my medals. Look at all my gold and my silver. Look at my entourage. Look at all these chariots. Look at all these clothes. See, Naaman thought that he was important enough for Elisha to just stop whatever it was he was doing and come and see him. But there is where Naaman meets his next no. And then Elisha's message is basically, go and jump in the river. He says, go and wash 7 times in the River Jordan and you will be healed. That's the message. And again, Naaman kind of bristles against this as well, because it's about purification. See, even though we're not told, but if he's willing to come all this way into enemy territory, he's probably already tried all sorts of different washings and purification rituals to sort this out back in Aram. See, this isn't new. This message that this prophet, this man of God, brings to him through his servant, this isn't new. This isn't something he hasn't already tried before. If all he's got to do is have a bath in a river, well, he may as well have stayed at home in Syria and dipped into one of those rivers. They're cleaner than this dirty old Jordan that Elisha's telling him to dip into. And so there's another no for Naaman. And so Naaman now, at this point in the story, is about to storm off. Why? Because the yes he's receiving doesn't look and feel the way that he's expecting. The yes feels a lot like a no. And this can happen to us as well, can't it? Even maybe just hearing that the yes doesn't look or feel the way you're expecting. Maybe hearing that stabs at something in you and you think, oh, I know what that feels like. In our lives, the yes isn't packaged in the way that we were expecting. You see, in this story in 2 Kings 5, God has already said yes to Naaman. The yes was already there. But Naaman had to come in with his own kind of set of expectations first, didn't he? He comes almost figuratively as well as actually riding in, doesn't he? Horses and chariots and clothes and gold and servants and a whole entourage saying, look at me, I'm a big deal. This is going to happen and it's going to happen on my terms and in the way that I expect. And yet it doesn't work out that way. And so even though it is a yes, as we get to the end of the story, we see it's a yes. It doesn't feel like one. It feels like a no. Naaman said, I thought that this prophet would come out to see me, that he would wave his hands over me and call on the name of his God, and then I'd be healed. That was Naaman's expectation. That's how Naaman thought this was going to go. That's what this yes was supposed to look like. Naaman thought that this yes was going to be something that was done for him. But that's this yes of an event, isn't it? But instead, it is still a yes, but Naaman is going to be invited to do something for God. Again, the same goes for us. It can really trip us up when we've already decided how God is going to say yes, and when God is going to say yes, and why God is going to say yes to us, and what that yes is going to look like. That trips us up because 9 times out of 10, it never works out like that, does it? Just think about your own life. Think about your own experiences. Think about your own story. When has God ever shown up and acted in the way that you were expecting? I know in my life, that's very rarely the case. Because it's not in my strength. It's not in my power. It's not in my might. Because God's ways are higher. God's thoughts are higher. And God's yes to us a lot of the time can feel like a no. God's yes often doesn't take us up. It invites us down. We don't want that, do we? We want a yes that moves us to the right and up. Like on all those charts, that's the figure that you want to see happening, isn't it? You want to see it going towards the right and up. That's the scale of progression. That's the scale to show that things are happening the right way. That's the scale of yes. And we don't want it if it's going down. We want a yes that makes us feel better, don't we? We want a yes that makes us look better. Often, the fear of humiliation itself can prevent us from the call of humility. I'll say that again because it's important. Often the fear of humiliation can prevent us from the call of humility. Because that's this shift from yes as an event to yes as an invitation, to yes as a practice. That shift from seeing it as God saying yes to me to God saying yes with me. That shift needs trust and it needs humility, it needs faith, this divine persuasion. And notice that Naaman has some really wise and brave people around him. His servant tells him, he says this, just as Naaman's ready to kind of storm off back to Syria in a huff, his servant says this to him. He's brave enough to even come and approach him and speak to him uninvited anyway. But his servant says, if this prophet, if Elijah had told you to do something big, or told you to do something difficult, or told you to do something extravagant, or told you to do something expensive, you'd have just done it, no questions asked. So why not try this simple thing? If Elisha had said you've got to go on this mythical epic quest and slay a dragon and save a princess and do all these feats of strength and power and intelligence and wealth, Naaman would of course jumped at the chance to prop up his own understanding of what's important, of what the yes is in his life. And this servant says, you'd have been willing to do that, so why not just try this easy thing? Why not just try this simple thing? Why not just try this humble thing? Why not just try this unexpected thing? Why not just try this thing that feels like a no, because it might just be a yes? Like Dr. Pepper, what's the worst that can happen? And so Naaman sees sense and does it. He washes 7 times in the Jordan, and we're told in the story that his skin is healed. He is renewed. Smooth as a baby's bottom, that's the Hebrew. But it's not just his skin that's healed, is it? His heart is healed in this story too. See, in these kinds of ancient civilizations, the understanding was that the power of the gods was bestowed upon certain individuals. So Elisha, as a man of God, as a prophet, is one of these individuals. And so, of course, Naaman expected Elisha to come out and to wave his hand over him, maybe even to lay his hands on him. He's not expecting just some random note from his servant. But notice that Elisha didn't heal Naaman. No. Instead, he had a direct encounter with the God of the universe. All of a sudden, this is way more about than about a skin disease and a general and a prophet and some arguing, warring kings. All of a sudden, this is way bigger than anything Naaman could have expected or imagined. So this wasn't about Naaman. This wasn't about how important he was and how influential he was and how successful he was and how powerful he was and how rich he was, how popular he was. It wasn't about any of that. This is all about God. This is all about God's yes. God's yes is the invitation for us to work with God, to work alongside God, to serve. As Jesus himself said, I came not to be served, but to serve. That's why at that supper, he knelt down on his hands and his knees and he washed his disciples' feet and he said, this is what you've got to do. This is what you've got to do. You've got to forget about the fact that this might be humiliating at the time, to become humble. As we saw last time when we looked at the word no, a couple of weeks back, sometimes our yes is actually a no. See, here in this story about Elisha and Naaman, we see that even when God says no, it's an invitation for us to say yes to something else. Just like how we see at the end of the story, Naaman says yes to God's invitation, and he is healed, and he is made whole and new. This kind of yes is what we all need to say. It comes at the end of the chapter of our lives as well. Just as it comes at the end of this story about Naaman, this kind of yes in our lives comes at the end of our stories, at the end of our chapters too. See, it takes us saying a lot of these yeses that actually mean no, and hearing a lot of these no's when we're expecting to hear a yes, before we get to the point of saying this kind of yes to God's invitation. When Naaman obeys God, he comes up out of the river changed on the inside as well as the outside. And he says, I will never worship any other God again. That's a yes. He is shifting from this yes as an event, going there just to get healed, going there just to scratch an itch, going there just to get... Scratch an itch, that's a good one. Going there just to get what he thinks he needs out of this situation and then get out of there. He shifts from this yes as an event to this yes as being a practice. But finally, and probably the best and the biggest example in this story of God's yes, is to someone that you may have even forgotten already. It's the servant girl that I read about right at the beginning of this story. You see, this girl, she hasn't chosen this type of work. She didn't apply and go through a lengthy interview process to become a slave. She was taken against her will. Actually, when Aram came and attacked Israel and defeated Israel the first time, they took away with them loads of different plunder and all sorts of stuff. But one of the spoils of war that they took with them were young girls to be slaves. This is one of those girls. She was taken against her will, taken away from her home and her family and her security and her future, and forced to serve the actual people that had snatched her away from all of those things. Now, in this story, she could have kept quiet. She has every right to kind of hold that kind of bitterness and resentment within her and to sulk about the no's that have been given to her in her life. But instead, she does something different. She speaks up. She embodies God's yes, not as an event, because the event in her life at that time was slavery in a foreign land. She embodies yes as a practice. Even when she has no power and no rights and no influence, the exact opposite to what we see Naaman in the story, and her circumstances are all against her own personal choice, yet she can still point someone towards God. She can still be that witness. She can still practice yes. So today, may your yes move you from an event into a practice. Amen.